Let's talk about the truth about tax rates. Now, a lot of people tell you that tax cuts are going to blow up the deficit. This is a lie. Let's talk about what happens when you actually cut tax rates. In 1981, Ronald Reagan cut taxes. The Jimmy Carter's rates were 70% of everything over $80,000. 81, Reagan cut the tax rates, and those kicked in 82. So in 81, the federal government took in $599 billion. Look it up for yourself. By 1991, the Reagan tax cuts had kicked in. The top marginal rate was down to 28%. The federal government took in $1,050 billion. That is more than a 50% increase in revenues, or $451 billion more a year, because Reagan cut the tax cuts. Because Reagan got the tax cuts through. Now, Microsoft, Apple, all took off because the American people had more money in their pocket. If you actually look at the tax rates and the tax revenue, the lower the rates, the higher the revenue, the higher the economic growth. So when people tell you that tax cuts lead to deficits, they're lying. They're assuming you're stupid because you don't know the truth. Go look up the tax rates and look up the tax revenue numbers for yourself. They're available online. Now let's look at a deficit real quick. That's spending. Spending and revenues, when you talk about government, have nothing to do with each other because they have the ability to borrow. So the spending rates were higher in 91 than they were in 81. So we still had a deficit. Even though revenues went up more than 50%, spending went up more than 50%. So we never balanced the budget. And as long as you spend in more than you take in, you're never going to balance the budget. So budgets, deficits, and revenues aren't directly connected if you're always going to outspend what you make. In addition, just look at the tax rates and look at the federal revenue, and you find out everything the mainstream media tells you and the majority of what the Democrats tell you are an utter lie. It's based on the Communist Manifesto. This is a progressive tax code intended to hurt the rich, not to raise revenue. And they always talk about this is going to help the rich, this is going to help the rich. That is communist rhetoric. Look up the Communist Manifesto for yourself. The purpose of the progressive tax code is to fine people who make money. The more you make, the bigger the fine you pay. The Democrats want to punish people for being successful. Well, successful people move overseas. The computer I'm shooting this on was made in China because the Chinese want the business. They don't punish Apple for making a MacBook Pro in China. My iPhone, made in China, because the Chinese reward companies with a lower corporate tax rate. American Democrats punish people. If you made this here in the United States, you'd pay a 35% corporate tax on it. Apple made it in China, they paid a 20% corporate tax on it. That is a 15% increase in their profits simply by putting it in China instead of the United States. The Republicans are lowering that tax rate down to 20%, not the 15% that Trump wanted, because then we'd be very competitive with China. We're just more competitive with China at 20%. So hopefully the Republicans come back and lower the rate to 15 and use it as a campaign issue at the midterms in the 2020 election. But remember, made in China, not by Americans, but by Chinese because of the corporate tax rate. We are going to become competitive. And China doesn't have much of a problem with having a lower tax rate. They've got streets, they've got roads, they've got schools, they're doing fine. But when somebody tells you that tax cuts decrease tax revenue, look it up for yourself and you'll find out that they're lying to you. They're lying to you because they think you're too stupid to go on the web and look up federal revenues, federal tax rates, and see the lower the rate, the higher the revenue. I'm Tim with Tim's TV. Please subscribe to my YouTube page. Come to timstv.com. Check us out. Thank you. I'm just telling you the truth about tax cuts, tax revenues. Look it up yourself if you don't believe me.